The acrid stench of the dirty mop struck my face. An instant later, crack. My head slammed against the marble countertop, a violent shove from my mother-in-law sending me reeling. Blood flowed freely, but the real terror began in the ER. When the doctor saw the birthmark behind my ear, his face went pale with fear, his hands trembling. Then, he whispered, "Before the story begins, please drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you even more compelling stories." It was 5 a.m., and the world was still asleep, wrapped in a cold, foggy blanket, but Alara was already awake. In the spacious kitchen, which felt suffocatingly small under the weight of hostility, Alara moved like a shadow. Her hands, slender but calloused from heavy labor, were busy chopping vegetables. The sound of the knife against the wooden cutting board was the only rhythm accompanying her silence. Alara couldn't remember the last time she'd slept more than 5 hours. Ever since marrying Ethan 2 years ago, her life had become a regimen of forced labor without pay. She stared at her faint reflection on the surface of an aluminum pot. Her eyes were tired, sunken, as if the soul within had been drained long ago. "Stop daydreaming, or you'll burn it." The shrill voice shattered Alara's concentration. Her heart pounded. She turned to find Margaret standing in the kitchen doorway, wearing a maroon silk nightgown, her gaze sharp enough to freeze boiling water. "Sorry, ma'am. I was just waiting for the oil to heat up," Alara answered softly, bowing her head, a self-preservation reflex that had become second nature. "Excuses!" Margaret sneered, striding into the room. She ran a finger across the kitchen counter, checking for any dust that might cling to it. "You're such an ungrateful girl. Plucked from a county shelter, given a home, given a handsome husband like Ethan, and you can't even manage a simple kitchen." Those words, "plucked from a county shelter," were always Margaret's weapon of choice. Alara remained silent. It was true. She had no memories before the age of 20. She had woken up in a county hospital 5 years ago with no name, no past, only a splitting headache and scars covering her body. Margaret had arrived a year later, like a guardian angel selecting her to be a daughter-in-law. But that angel turned out to be a prison warden. At 6 a.m. sharp, Ethan came down from the second floor. The man looked impeccable in his work suit, the scent of expensive cologne wafting from him. To Alara, that scent was nauseating. It was the smell of cowardice. "Morning, Mom." "Morning, Alara," Ethan greeted them flatly, sitting down at the dining table and immediately opening his phone. Alara served the bacon and perfectly cooked sunny-side-up eggs before them. She stood beside the table, waiting for the next instruction like a restaurant waitress, not a wife. Margaret took a bite of her toast, chewed it slowly, and then suddenly spat the food back onto her plate. "Ugh, it's burnt. Are you trying to give me cancer?" "Huh?" Margaret shrieked. Alara flinched. "But ma'am, I set the toaster just like always." Margaret turned to her son. "Look at your wife, Ethan. She's starting to talk back. She serves this garbage and calls it normal." Ethan didn't even lift his gaze from his phone screen. "Just drop it, Alara. If Mom says it's burnt, it's burnt. Just apologize and make her some oatmeal. Don't make a big deal out of it." Alara clenched her fists behind her threadbare apron. A burning sensation spread through her chest, not from anger, but from a crushing sense of powerlessness. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll make you something else right away," Alara said, her voice trembling. Behind her back, Margaret smiled faintly, a smile of victory and cunning. She knew the toast was fine. She just needed a reason to start her day by mentally torturing her daughter-in-law. For her, watching Alara suffer was the most delicious breakfast. After the breakfast incident, Alara was given no chance to rest. Margaret handed her a to-do list of unreasonable length. But one command made Alara's blood run cold. "Today, you're cleaning out the back shed until it's spotless. No dust, no rats. I want that shed empty, and all the old things put into new cardboard boxes," Margaret ordered as she sipped her sweet tea on the porch. "The back shed?" Alara asked hesitantly. "But ma'am, the roof is leaking, and there are piles of sharp, splintered wood." Ethan said it was dangerous. "Oh, so now you're hiding behind your husband's name?" Margaret glared. "Ethan is at work. He's tired from earning money to feed you. You're just asked to clean a shed and you're full of excuses. Do it, or you're sleeping outside the gate tonight." With a heavy heart, Alara walked towards the semi-permanent structure behind the main house. The shed was damp, musty, and dark. Sunlight only seeped through cracks in the broken shingles. Alara began moving old items. Stacks of old magazines, broken furniture, and piles of Margaret's old clothes. Dust flew everywhere, making it hard to breathe. As she was shifting a decrepit old wooden wardrobe, her eyes caught something in the corner of the room, hidden behind a stack of old newspapers. A carved mahogany box. The box looked completely out of place among the surrounding junk. Its carvings were intricate, and its lock was made of tarnished brass. Alara moved closer, crouching down to get a better look. There was a small initial engraved on the bottom. A.S. Alara's heart fluttered strangely. Déjà vu. The feeling was like a lightning bolt striking her empty memory. She felt she had seen the lily pattern carved on the box before. Her hand reached out, her fingers trembling as they touched the cold wooden surface. Why? Why does this hurt so much? Alara whispered to herself. Her head suddenly throbbed with pain. Faint images of fire, the screech of tires, and someone's scream flashed through her mind. Bang! The shed door was thrown open. Blinding light flooded in, creating a silhouette of Margaret's bulky frame in the doorway. "What are you doing over there?" Margaret shrieked. Her voice wasn't just angry. It was panicked. Alara jumped, nearly dropping the box. "Ma'am, I found this box behind the wardrobe." Margaret's face went pale, then turned crimson with rage. She rushed in, her steps thudding on the fragile wooden floor, and snatched the box from Alara's hands. "Who told you to touch this? How dare you?" Margaret clutched the box tightly as if its contents were her very life. "I was just cleaning, ma'am. I didn't know." "Get out!" Margaret bellowed, her eyes wild. Cold sweat beaded on her temples. "Get out of here! And don't you ever set foot in this shed again without my permission? Go!" Alara ran out in terror. She didn't understand why her mother-in-law was so hysterical over an old box. But one thing was certain. Margaret's reaction confirmed that something was being hidden, and the initials A.S. kept dancing in Alara's aching head. Afternoon turned to evening, but the tension in the house had not subsided. Margaret was still pacing anxiously in the living room. She had secured the wooden box in a new hiding place inside her bedroom, safe, but paranoia had already taken hold. "She's starting to remember," Margaret thought. "No, it's impossible. The doctor said her amnesia was permanent due to temporal lobe damage," she muttered, trying to calm herself. But the look in that damn girl's eyes was different today. Alara, unaware of the turmoil in her mother-in-law's mind, was mopping the dining room floor. She worked in silence, trying to be invisible. She was using a bucket of water that was already murky and brown from the dirt in the shed. Margaret walked to the dining table, pouring a glass of water to soothe her dry throat. As she turned, her foot snagged slightly on the edge of the mop Alara was moving. A little water from Margaret's glass spilled onto her nightgown. It was a small, trivial accident, but for Margaret, already consumed by fear and paranoia, it was the trigger for an explosion. "You did that on purpose, didn't you?" Margaret shrieked, her voice piercing the evening quiet. Alara immediately knelt. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It was an accident. I didn't see you turning." "Liar! You're holding a grudge because I yelled at you in the shed, aren't you? You're trying to hurt me in my own house." Margaret's rage escalated. She looked at the mop bucket near Alara's feet. The water was black, greasy, and full of germs. Without warning, Margaret's hand snatched the mop rag that Alara was wringing out. It was wet, heavy, and disgusting. "You want to know what filth feels like?" "Huh?" "Ma'am, don't!" Alara pleaded, her eyes wide with terror. Splot! Margaret threw the wet, smelly mop rag with all her strength, right in Alara's face. Alara's world went dark for a moment. The musty smell, the odor of dirt, and floor cleaner assaulted her nose. Dirty water trickled down her face, soaking her clothes, getting into her mouth and stinging her eyes. It wasn't just physically dirty. Her dignity felt as if it had been stomped flat into the ground. "That's what you deserve, you ungrateful orphan." Margaret's breath came in ragged gasps. "Now clean that disgusting face of yours." Alara pulled the rag from her face. Her eyes were red, tears mixing with the mop water streaming down her cheeks. She looked up at Margaret, not bowing her head this time. There was a glint of profound pain in her eyes. "Why are you so cruel to me?" Alara whispered, her voice hoarse. The question only made Margaret more furious. She didn't like that look. It was the same look that woman had Alara's biological mother, whom she used to serve, a look of dignity. "How dare you look at me like that?" Margaret advanced a step, her hand raised. The atmosphere in the dining room was so thick it felt as if the air itself was afraid to move. Alara was still kneeling on the wet floor, while Margaret loomed over her like a giant ready to devour its prey. The front door opened. Ethan was home. "What's all the noise?" Ethan asked, loosening his tie. He saw his wife, soaked in dirty water, and his furious mother. But instead of helping his wife, Ethan just sighed in annoyance. "I come home tired from work, and this is the drama I get. This wife of yours, Ethan, she tried to hurt me. She purposely tripped me, I almost fell." Margaret lied, twisting the facts with ease. Alara shook her head weakly. "No, Ethan." She threw the rag at. "Shut up," Margaret snapped. Alara tried to stand. Her legs were trembling from exhaustion and shock. The floor around her was slick with the water that had spilled from the mop rag. As she tried to pull herself up, Margaret, still consumed by rage, saw her chance. "Don't you dare stand up in front of me when I'm talking." Margaret shoved Alara's shoulders with both hands with all her might. The push was hard and sudden. On the slick tile floor, Alara had no footing. Her body stumbled backward, flying uncontrollably. Time seemed to slow. Alara could see the dining room ceiling spin. And then, thud. A sickening sound echoed as the back of Alara's head struck the sharp corner of a marble decorative table behind her. It wasn't a loud noise, but a dull, painful one. The sound of bone meeting stone. Alara's body slumped to the floor. Silence. 1 second. 2 seconds. A thick red liquid began to seep from behind Alara's dark hair, flowing quickly across the white tile floor, mixing with the grimy mop water. The blood was bright red, gushing as if a dam had broken. "Alara!" Ethan, who had been silent until now, finally screamed. His eyes widened at the sight of the growing pool of blood. Margaret stumbled back 2 steps, her hands covering her mouth, her face ashen not from pity, but from fear of the legal consequences. She slipped. "You saw it, Ethan." The floor was wet. She slipped on her own. Ethan rushed to his wife's motionless body. He slapped Alara's cold cheeks. "Alara? Alara, wake up!" There was no response. Alara's breathing was faint and ragged. "Mom, there's so much blood. We have to take her to the hospital," Ethan yelled in panic, his hands now covered in his own wife's blood. "Don't be a fool," Margaret hissed, her criminal mind working fast. "If we take her to the hospital, the police might get suspicious. We'll just say she fell in the bathroom. Are you crazy? This is a massive hemorrhage. If she dies here, we're in even bigger trouble." For the first time in his life, Ethan yelled at his mother. The fear of having a dead body in the house overpowered his fear of her. Ethan lifted Alara's light body. His wife's head lolled weakly. Blood continued to drip, creating a horrifying trail all the way to the car. Margaret followed, trembling, her mind busy fabricating an alibi. "Remember, Ethan," Margaret whispered as they got in the car. She fell on her own. "You're my witness. Don't mention a word about me pushing her. Got it?" Ethan didn't answer. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. In the back seat, Alara lay still, her life hanging by a thread. The city's central hospital emergency room was busy, but the arrival of Ethan carrying a blood-soaked woman immediately drew the attention of the nurses. "Help my wife. Her head is split open," Ethan shouted. Dr. Ryan Cole, the ER chief on duty that night, rushed over. He was a man in his early 30s with sharp, intelligent eyes that looked perpetually tired. "Get her to a bed, nurse. Prep a saline IV and a suture kit. Check her vitals now," Dr. Cole commanded firmly. The curtain was drawn. Margaret and Ethan were forced to wait outside. Behind the curtain, Dr. Cole worked swiftly. He trimmed a bit of hair around the wound to see the source of the bleeding. "It's a deep laceration to the scalp, from blunt force trauma. Blood pressure is dropping, doctor. 90/60. Pulse is weak," a nurse reported. "Put her on oxygen." "I'm going to stop the bleeding first," Ryan said. He grabbed alcohol swabs and antiseptic solution. As Dr. Cole tilted Alara's head to clean the blood that had flowed down her neck and behind her ear, his movements suddenly froze. His eyes were fixed on the smooth patch of skin behind Alara's right ear. There, Slightly covered by her hair was a very specific birthmark, the shape of two crescent moons, back to back, a reddish-brown color. Dr. Cole's breath caught in his throat. He knew that mark. 5 years ago, when he was still a neurosurgery resident, he had treated a young VIP patient, the only daughter of the magnate William Sterling, who had been in a fatal car accident. That patient had the exact same birthmark. That patient had been declared missing from the rural hospital where she was first treated before she could be transferred to the city, and was never found. The case became a massive mystery. Ryan swallowed hard, his hand trembling slightly. He examined her more closely. He saw a faint, thin scar near her clavicle. It was a scar from a pin insertion for a broken collarbone, a scar whose position he knew intimately, because his own mentor had performed that surgery 5 years ago. Dr. Cole's face went white, the blood draining from it. He looked at the sleeping patient's face. Though she was gaunt and looked like she had suffered, her bone structure was that of Amelia Sterling. "Doctor, is something wrong?" the nurse asked, confused at seeing her superior frozen in place. Ryan snapped back to reality. He looked at the nurse with a changed expression. His role had shifted from doctor to protector. "Nurse, continue cleaning the wound and suture it neatly. Don't let anyone inside this curtain, especially the family outside. Tell them I'm performing a complex sterilization procedure," Ryan whispered, his voice quick and sharp. "Okay, doctor. But why? Just do it." Ryan stepped back, roughly pulling off his gloves and tossing them into a medical waste bin. He slipped out through a side door, heading for the empty doctor's lounge. He reached into his white coat pocket and pulled out his phone. His fingers quickly dialed a number, saved in his private emergency contacts. The number of a police commissioner who was also the uncle of the missing Amelia Sterling. The phone rang twice before it was answered. "Hello, Ryan. It's late for a call." "Commissioner." Ryan's voice trembled with a mixture of anger and tension. "I've found her. She's in my ER right now." "Who? What are you talking about?" Amelia Sterling. She's alive, Commissioner." Ryan glanced towards the waiting room door, where he could see the silhouettes of Margaret and Ethan in the distance. "And her condition is horrific. Someone hid her, and they tried to kill her again tonight." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then the voice on the other side became cold and authoritative. "Lock down all the exits. Don't let anyone take her. I'm sending a SWAT team now." Ryan hung up. He looked at his reflection in the dark window pane. Tonight, a massive secret was about to be exposed, and a war had just begun. The clock on the hospital waiting room wall seemed to move in torturous slow motion. An hour had passed since Dr. Cole had gone back behind the ER curtain, sealing it off from everyone. Margaret sat on a cold metal chair, her foot tapping an impatient rhythm on the floor. "What's taking so long?" she grumbled, her eyes scanning the quiet hospital corridor. "It's just a few stitches." "Why is it like open-heart surgery, Ethan? Go knock on the door. We need to get her home before she wakes up and starts talking nonsense." Ethan, sitting next to her with his shirt still stained with his wife's blood, looked hesitant. His face was pale. The image of the blood pooling on their floor still haunted him. "Mom, the doctor said it was a complex procedure. If we force our way in, it'll just look suspicious. Let's just be patient." "Patient? You think we have time?" Margaret hissed, her voice sharp but low. "Every second she's in there without our supervision, the risk of her talking grows. She could tell them I pushed her, but you did push her, Mom." "Shut your mouth!" Margaret glared, nearly slapping her son before realizing they were in a public place. "It was an accident. Remember the story. The floor was wet. She fell. Period." Suddenly, the automatic glass doors at the end of the ER corridor slid open. It wasn't one or two people who entered, but a group of officers in full tactical gear, followed by two men in plain clothes with police badges hanging from their necks. Their steps were firm, their military boots echoing with authority on the marble floor. The quiet waiting room was instantly filled with a tense, intimidating atmosphere. Other visitors moved aside, sensing danger. Ethan sat up straight, his eyes wide. "Mom, why are the police here?" Margaret felt her stomach drop. Her criminal instincts screamed danger. She was about to stand up and slip away, but one of the men in plain clothes, a stocky detective, had already locked his gaze on her. The man pointed directly at them. "Secure them. Don't let them move an inch," the detective ordered. In an instant, 4 uniformed officers surrounded Margaret and Ethan. "What is the meaning of this? We're the patient's family," Margaret yelled, trying her old tactic of loud intimidation. "You have no right to detain us. My daughter-in-law is sick in there." Dr. Cole emerged from the ER. This time, his face was unmasked and cold. His gaze pierced straight through Margaret. The detective stood beside him. "Family? Doctor." Cole sneered, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Based on the physical evidence on the patient's body, tormentor would be a more accurate word. "You insolent doctor! I'll sue this hospital." Margaret struggled as an officer gripped her arm. "Ma'am, and you, sir," the detective said in a heavy voice, pulling out a warrant. "You are being detained not only on suspicion of felony domestic assault, but also for kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and attempted murder of Miss Amelia Sterling." That name, Amelia Sterling, was like a lightning bolt that struck Margaret directly in the heart. Her face, which had been red with rage, instantly turned a deathly gray. Her legs gave out. She knew the game was over. Ethan looked at his mother in confusion. "Amelia? Who's Amelia? My wife's name is Alara. Officer, you have the wrong person. We never make a mistake identifying Mr. Sterling's daughter," the detective replied coldly. "Take them to an isolation room in the hospital. Tight security. Don't let them communicate with each other." Margaret and Ethan were separated. Ethan was taken to a hospital security office now guarded by police, while Margaret was dragged to an empty administration room that had been converted into a makeshift interrogation room. Inside, Margaret sat across from Detective Miller. Her hands weren't cuffed, but 2 officers stood guard behind her. Margaret tried to put her mask back on. She took a deep breath, her expression shifting to that of a wronged old woman. "Officer, this is a huge misunderstanding," she began, her voice a fabricated tremble. "My daughter-in-law, Alara, she's an orphan. I took her in from the Loving Arms shelter 5 years ago. I cared for her, fed her, married her to my son. I don't know this Amelia person you're talking about." Detective Miller didn't react. He simply placed a tablet on the table and played a security recording from a rural hospital 5 years ago, footage that had just been pulled from the police digital archives after Dr. Cole's call. The video was blurry, but it clearly showed the chaos of an ER after a multi-car pileup. A middle-aged woman, a younger Margaret wearing a cleaning service uniform, was seen pushing a wheelchair carrying an unconscious female patient out a back door, away from the medical staff. Margaret stared at the screen, her eyes twitching. "We've run your background, Margaret," Miller said flatly. "Before you suddenly retired and started living off unexplained income, you worked as the head housekeeper at the Sterling family residence for 10 years. You were fired for stealing the lady of the house's jewelry." "That's a lie! It was a frame-up!" Margaret retorted. "And 5 years ago, when the news of Amelia Sterling's accident broke, you were at the scene. You didn't get her medical help. You saw an opportunity. You saw your former employer's dying, amnesiac daughter as a lottery ticket." Detective Miller leaned forward. Dr. Cole found the scar from a surgical pin in the victim's collarbone. "The serial number of that pin is registered to Amelia Sterling. You can't deny it anymore." Margaret trembled, not from guilt, but from a surge of pure hatred. Her plan had been perfect. For 5 years, Alara was her cash cow and the outlet for her revenge. The girl was obedient, stupid, and remembered nothing. Why did it all have to fall apart now, just because of a stupid mop rag? "She deserved it," Margaret muttered softly, her kind mother mask shattering completely. "What did you say?" Margaret looked up, her eyes now gleaming with pure insanity. "The Sterlings are arrogant. They fired me for taking one tiny ring. One ring! After I'd served them for 10 years. So when I saw their precious daughter lying on the side of the road like trash, I picked her up. I made her my servant. I wanted to see the billionaire's daughter scrub my toilets, eat my leftovers. It was only fair, wasn't it?" The confession poured out, fueled by an ego and hatred that had festered in her heart for years. Detective Miller smiled faintly. He pointed to a one-way mirror on the side wall. "Thank you for your confession. It's all been recorded." The door opened. An officer entered and whispered to Miller. "The Eagle has landed on the roof. Mr. Sterling has arrived." The sound of helicopter blades sliced through the night air on the hospital's rooftop helipad. Strong winds kicked up dust as a sleek black helicopter with the Sterling Industries logo landed perfectly. The helicopter door slid open. William Sterling stepped out. The 60-year-old man still looked imposing, though his hair was now completely white. The lines on his face were hardened by 5 years of grieving his only child. Behind him, a team of lawyers and the family's personal physician followed with brisk steps. He didn't walk, he stormed. He covered the long hospital corridor in wide strides. Every nurse and doctor who crossed his path moved aside, making way for an aura of power and sorrow mixed into one. Dr. Cole was waiting in front of the VIP room where Alara or Amelia had been moved. "Mr. Sterling," Ryan greeted him, his tone polite but firm. "Her condition is stable, but she has a moderate concussion. She just regained consciousness." "Where is she?" Mr. Sterling's voice was hoarse, trembling with restrained emotion. "Is it really her, my daughter? Don't give me false hope, doctor. I've been broken too many times. Please, sir, see for yourself." Mr. Sterling pushed the door open slowly. The room was quiet, with only the steady beep of the heart monitor. On the bed, a young woman lay weakly. Her head was wrapped in a thick bandage, her face was bruised, and her body was painfully thin, a far cry from the vibrant, cheerful daughter he remembered. But when the woman slowly turned her head towards the door, Mr. Sterling felt his knees buckle. Those eyes, those almond-shaped, light brown eyes, they belonged to his late wife. They belonged to Amelia. Amelia, Mr. Sterling walked closer, the tears he had held back for 5 years finally falling. He touched his daughter's hand, which was rough and covered in what looked like small burn scars. His heart shattered into a million pieces, seeing the hands that once only played the piano now damaged by forced labor. Alara stared at the old man crying before her. Her head was still throbbing with excruciating pain. The hard impact against the marble table seemed to have cracked the thick wall that had blocked her memories for so long. Fragments of images began to surface in her mind. A man teaching her to ride a bike, a lavish birthday party, an overturned car, and this man's face. "Dad?" Alara's voice came out as a barely audible whisper, hoarse and foreign to her own ears. That single word was enough. Mr. Sterling embraced his daughter, burying his face in Amelia's thin shoulder, sobbing like a child. "Forgive me, my child. Forgive me for not finding you sooner. Forgive me, Dad." In the corner of the room, the Sterling family's private doctor quickly drew a blood sample from the IV line for a rapid DNA test, a legal formality. But for Mr. Sterling, he didn't need a lab report. A father's bond never lies. Outside the room, Dr. Cole closed the door gently, giving them their privacy. He let out a long breath, feeling a heavy weight lift from his shoulders. But he knew his job wasn't done. He had to make sure the people who did this to Amelia paid dearly. While the moving reunion was happening in the VIP room, Ethan was having an existential crisis in the security office. He paced back and forth, cold sweat soaking his shirt. He was trying to process the information he had just heard. "Amelia Sterling. My wife is the daughter of the richest man in the country," Ethan muttered hysterically. His shallow mind began to calculate. If Alara was Amelia, that meant he was a billionaire's son-in-law. Visions of a luxurious life, sports cars, and endless money flashed through his mind. "I'm an idiot. I'm such an idiot," Ethan cursed himself. "Why didn't Mom tell me? If I had known she was rich, I would have treated her like a queen, not a maid." The office door opened. Detective Miller walked in, carrying a cardboard box of evidence seized from Margaret's house, including the carved wooden box Alara had found in the shed. "Sit down, Ethan," Miller commanded. Ethan sat obediently. "Sir, I can explain. I didn't know anything about a kidnapping. I'm a victim of my mother's lies, too." "Oh, you're a victim of your own stupidity, but you're no victim in the case of torture." Miller laid out photos of Alara's physical condition on the table. Scars from an iron, welts from a broomstick, and severe malnutrition. "You lived in the same house with her. You watched your wife be treated like a slave for 2 years of marriage, and you stayed silent. Under the law, allowing a crime to happen is a crime itself." Miller then opened the carved wooden box. Inside was an old passport in the name of Amelia Sterling, a broken diamond necklace, and several photos of Amelia before the accident. "Your mother, Margaret, is a patient predator," Miller began, laying out the narrative the police had pieced together. 5 years ago, she found Amelia thrown from her car during an accident on a state highway. Instead of calling the police, she saw this diamond necklace. She took Amelia to her old rental house in a small town, treating her wounds just enough to keep her alive. Ethan listened, his mouth agape. When Amelia woke up with no memory, Margaret realized she had a valuable asset. She changed Amelia's name to Alara. She brainwashed the girl into believing she was a worthless orphan who owed Margaret her life. Her initial goal might have just been to sell her off, but then her grudge against the Sterling family took over. Miller looked at Ethan with disgust. She wanted the daughter of her wealthy former employer to end up as a servant for her unemployed son. And you, Ethan, you were her most effective tool of torture. You destroyed that woman's spirit with your indifference. I loved her, sir. Ethan tried to defend himself, but his voice sounded fake even to his own ears. You didn't love her, Miller cut him off. You loved the convenience she provided. Clean clothes, cooked meals, a tidy house. You loved your slave, not your wife. An officer entered with the results of the DNA test, just sent via fax from the forensics lab. It's a positive match, detective. 99.9%. Miller nodded. Take him to a temporary holding cell. We'll transfer him to central booking in the morning. As he was being led away, Ethan shouted, Wait! I want to see my wife. I'm her husband. She'll forgive me. Alara is madly in love with me. No one listened to his cries. 3 days later, Amelia's condition was stable enough for her to leave the hospital. Though she had to use a wheelchair and her head was still bandaged, her face was much cleaner. Proper nutrition over the past 3 days had brought a slight glow back to her skin. Though her eyes still held a vacant, traumatized look, Mr. Sterling insisted on taking his daughter home that day. However, legal procedures required Amelia to give a brief statement at the police station to complete the files for Margaret and Ethan's detention. The police station lobby was swarming with reporters. The case of the billionaire's daughter who was enslaved by her mother-in-law had become a national headline. Cameras flashed as Mr. Sterling pushed Amelia's wheelchair, flanked by private bodyguards. In a confrontation room separated by glass, Ethan and Margaret were brought in. They were wearing orange prison jumpsuits. Margaret looked disheveled, her hair a mess, her face full of hatred. Ethan looked pathetic, his eyes swollen from crying. The moment he saw Amelia enter, Ethan jumped up and pressed himself against the glass partition. Honey! Alara! Amelia! He shouted, placing his palms on the glass. It's me, Ethan, your husband. Forgive me, honey. I promise I'll change. I'll take care of you. Don't let them keep us apart. Amelia looked at the man. Her memory wasn't fully restored, but the feelings of pain, fear, and disappointment were still very real. She remembered how he just sat there while she was being hit. She remembered how he cared more about the game on his phone when she was running a high fever. Slowly, Amelia raised her hand, signaling her lawyer to bring the intercom microphone closer. Who are you? Amelia asked. Her voice was quiet, flat, and as cold as ice. Ethan was stunned. It's me, Alara, your husband. Husband? Amelia tilted her head slightly, as if pondering a foreign concept. I don't remember having a husband. What I remember in that house were 2 people, one old monster and one parasite who lived off my sweat. Ethan stumbled back a step, his face pale as if he'd been slapped. Amelia then turned her gaze to Margaret, who sat silently with a murderous stare. And you, Amelia said, her eyes locking with Margaret's. You said I owed you my life because you picked me up. You're wrong, you didn't pick me up. You stole me. And now, I'm taking my life back. Every drop of blood that I shed on that kitchen floor you will pay for with every second of the rest of your life in prison. You ungrateful brat! Margaret shrieked before officers pulled her back. Amelia turned off the microphone. She looked at her father, Mr. Sterling, who stood beside her with pride. Let's go home, Dad. This place smells like trash, Amelia said. Mr. Sterling nodded, pushing his daughter's wheelchair, turning away from the room, leaving Ethan to collapse to the floor, wailing, realizing that he had thrown away a diamond to keep a pebble. Outside the police station, it began to rain. Dr. Cole stood near their car, holding an umbrella. He watched as Amelia was helped into the luxury vehicle. Their eyes met for a moment. Amelia gave a small nod of thanks. Ryan replied with a sincere smile. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of Amelia Sterling's resurrection. And for Margaret and Ethan, Hell was just opening its gates. The morning sun pierced through cream-colored silk curtains, falling gently on the Persian rug that covered the floor of the vast bedroom. Amelia awoke not to the shrill screams of her mother-in-law or a cheap, blaring alarm, but to the scent of lavender from a humidifier in the corner of the room. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling, adorned with a crystal chandelier. For a moment, panic seized her. Her hands fumbled at the side of the bed, searching for a mop or a broom. "Miss Sterling, are you all right?" A private nurse in a crisp white uniform entered with a tray of medication and a glass of fresh pomegranate juice. Amelia took a long breath, her heartbeat slowly returning to normal. She was no longer Alara, the maid. She was in the Sterling mansion. "I dreamed I was cleaning a bathroom," Amelia murmured. Her voice was still weak, but stronger than it was a week ago. A month had passed since the hospital incident. The wound on Amelia's head had healed, leaving a thin scar now hidden by her bangs, which were starting to grow back healthy. The wounds on her soul, however, would take much longer to mend. That afternoon, Dr. Cole arrived for a routine cognitive therapy session. Amelia was in her wheelchair in the mansion's back garden, gazing at the tranquil koi pond. "How's your memory today?" Ryan asked, sitting on a garden bench next to her. He wasn't wearing a doctor's coat, but a casual shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "The fragments are getting clearer, Ryan," Amelia answered without turning. "I remember the day of the accident. I remember my car being sideswiped by a truck on a sharp turn. Then I was thrown out. I remember Margaret's face leaning over me. She didn't call an ambulance. She took my necklace, and she smiled." Amelia's hands gripped the arms of her wheelchair until her knuckles turned white. "She smiled while watching me die. How can a person be so evil?" Ryan looked at Amelia with deep sympathy. Evil is often born from uncontrolled envy. Margaret felt the world was unfair to her, so she created injustice for someone else. Amelia turned to look into the young doctor's eyes. "I was so stupid, wasn't I? Letting myself be trampled on for 2 years. Serving that useless Ethan. You weren't stupid, you were injured. Amnesia and psychological manipulation gaslighting are a lethal combination. You were a victim, Amelia. Don't blame yourself." Amelia shook her head slowly. Her gaze turned cold and hard, resembling her father's. "No, Ryan. Alara was the victim. But Amelia is a survivor. And Amelia is not going to let them get away with just a prison sentence. I want them to feel what I felt. To lose everything." Ryan saw the change. A new fire had been lit in Amelia's eyes. A fire that was dangerous, yet captivating. "What's your plan?" he asked softly. Amelia smiled faintly. "My father has the lawyers ready, but I'll be the one writing the script." The next day, the legal storm began. Ethan, currently out on bail, paid for by a distant relative of Margaret's who had been duped by her sob story, was sitting idly on his porch. The house was quiet, dirty, and messy. Without Alara, the place was a wreck. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink, growing mold. Dirty clothes were scattered on the sofa. A black sedan pulled up in front of the gate. 2 men in sharp suits got out, carrying leather briefcases. One of them was Mr. Henderson, the Sterling family's lead attorney, known as a shark in the courtroom. Ethan stood up nervously. "Who are you? Reporters?" Henderson didn't answer, instead handing him a thick brown envelope. "Mr. Thompson, I represent my client, Miss Amelia Sterling. These are divorce papers." Ethan took the envelope with a trembling hand. "Divorce? No, I don't want a divorce. I still love my wife." "Save the drama for daytime television," Henderson cut him off coldly. "Inside that file, you'll also find a civil lawsuit for damages related to modern slavery, physical torture, and emotional distress during your 2-year marriage. The total claim for damages is $50 million. Ethan's eyes nearly popped out of his head. $50 million? Are you insane? Where would I get that kind of money? "We know you don't have it," Henderson continued casually, signaling to his associate, who began plastering large, bright red stickers on the front gate and door that read, "Seized by court order." "What is this?" Ethan screamed hysterically. "This house is in my mother's name." "Not exactly. According to a forensic audit, the down payment for this house came from the sale of stolen jewelry belonging to the Sterling family 5 years ago. The bank has already approved the asset seizure to pay a portion of the damages. You have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings and get off this property. Ethan staggered backward, his legs weak. This house was his only refuge. But where am I supposed to live? Henderson straightened his suit, looking at Ethan with measured condescension. Perhaps you could try sleeping in the back shed, like you allowed your wife to do. Oh. My apologies. The shed is being seized as well. Good day. The lawyers left, leaving Ethan standing frozen on the lawn of the house that was no longer his. The sky above grew dark and cloudy, as if the universe itself was laughing at his downfall. Ethan's life turned 180 degrees in a week. No house, no car, which was also repossessed for missed payments, and no job. The news of his and his mother's cruelty had gone viral. Every time Ethan applied for a job, the HR department only had to type his name into Google to see his face under headlines like, "Vile husband tortures heiress wife." He was kicked out of one cheap motel after another because the owners didn't want a criminal on their premises. Now, Ethan ended up sleeping at an abandoned bus stop on the edge of the city, using a piece of cardboard for a bed. His stomach ached with hunger, having only eaten a stale pastry he bought with a few coins he made from begging something that deeply humiliated him. That night, it rained heavily. The roof of the bus stop leaked, dripping water right onto his feet. The cold was bone-chilling. Ethan curled up, hugging his knees. His mind drifted to memories of when Alara was still there. Alara, who always had a warm bath ready for him when he got home. Alara, who would massage his feet even though she was exhausted herself. Alara, who never complained even when he gave her barely enough money for groceries. How did it come to this? Ethan sobbed. But instead of introspection, his small mind looked for a scapegoat. This is all Amelia's father's fault. That arrogant old man, he's tearing a husband and wife apart. Amelia must still love me. She's just being influenced by her father. Hunger and desperation eroded his sanity. Ethan pulled out his crack-screen phone. He opened his social media and made a clarification video. In it, Ethan acted sad, his eyes puffy, his clothes shabby. Hey everyone, I'm Ethan. I'm Alara's, or Amelia's, husband. I want to set the record straight. I never abused my wife. It's all lies from a rich man who wants to separate us. I'm homeless now, kicked out by my cruel father-in-law. Amelia, if you see this, I miss you. I know they're forcing you to hate me. Please, come back. He uploaded the video. Within hours, it went viral. The reaction, however, was split. The vast majority of netizens vilified him, but a small, gullible minority believed his crocodile tears and began attacking the Sterling family with the narrative of the rich oppressing the poor. At the Sterling mansion, Amelia watched the video on her tablet. She wasn't angry, she just laughed softly. A dry, chilling laugh. He's digging his own grave, Amelia murmured. She pressed the intercom button. Mr. Henderson, prepare Plan B. The bait has been taken. Before executing her grand plan for Ethan, Amelia needed one more closure. She had to see Margaret's face. At the State Correctional Facility for Women, the visitation room was separated by thick glass and iron bars. Amelia arrived wearing an elegant black dress, a stark contrast to the faded orange jumpsuit Margaret wore. Margaret looked 10 years older than she had a month ago. Her cheeks were hollow, her hair completely white. But when she saw Amelia, the fire of hatred in her old eyes still burned. Well, look who it is, Margaret sneered, her voice hoarse. The princess descending from her castle to look at the common folk. Amelia sat down gracefully, placing her designer handbag on the table. I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable in your new home, Margaret. I hear you're sharing a cell with a contract killer. I hope she doesn't snore. Don't you get cocky, you little stray, Margaret hissed, banging on the glass. You think you've won? You just got lucky you have a rich daddy. Without his money, you're still Alara, the kitchen maid. Amelia looked at Margaret flatly. There was no fear left. The figure who once haunted her was now just a pathetic old woman behind glass. You know, Margaret, Amelia said softly, I remember everything now, including the day you found me. I remember you going through my jacket pocket, taking my wallet, and throwing my ID card into a river. That's not the act of someone trying to help. That's the act of a thief. So what? You going to report me to the police again? I'm already in here, Margaret challenged. No. I came here to tell you something that Ethan doesn't have the guts to say, Amelia smirked. Your house has been seized, your belongings have been auctioned off, and your precious son, Ethan, is now a homeless man sleeping at a bus stop. He doesn't even have enough money to buy you a bar of soap in this prison. Margaret's eyes widened. Her defenses crumbled. Her assets and her son were the two things she was most proud of. You're lying. Ethan would never… Ethan will help me. Amelia produced a photo taken by a private investigator the day before. A photo of a filthy Ethan rummaging through a dumpster behind a convenience store. She pressed the photo against the glass. Look at the result of your parenting, Margaret. You were so busy torturing me, you forgot to teach your son how to survive. You're the one who destroyed him, not me. Margaret stared at the photo, tears beginning to stream down her face. Her cries were not of remorse, but of total defeat. She howled, banging on the glass, cursing Amelia, cursing her fate. Amelia stood up, smoothing her dress. Enjoy your golden years in here. And don't worry, I'll make sure you serve your maximum sentence. Goodbye, Margaret. Amelia turned and walked away, leaving a hysterical Margaret being forcibly dragged away by prison guards. A heavy burden had been lifted from Amelia's chest. Now, it was Ethan's turn. The viral video had caused public opinion to sway slightly. Amelia knew she had to destroy the wronged husband narrative once and for all. Not with lawyers, but with Ethan's own confession. Through an anonymous intermediary, Amelia sent a message to Ethan. She agreed to meet. A mediation dinner. Just the two of us. No lawyers, no father. At the Skyview restaurant, 8 p.m. Ethan felt like he'd hit the jackpot. He was sure Amelia had softened after seeing his video. He borrowed a used blazer from a fellow homeless person, shaved his beard in a public restroom, and walked for miles to the fancy restaurant on top of a skyscraper. When Ethan arrived, Amelia was already seated at a corner table with a panoramic view of the city lights. Amelia looked stunning in a maroon dress, beautiful, but intimidating. "Honey," Ethan approached, about to hug her. "Sit," Amelia commanded coldly. Ethan sat, smiling awkwardly. "Thanks for agreeing to see me. I knew you still loved me. We can start over, right? We can forget the past. I can help you manage your father's company." The greed was immediate. Amelia suppressed her disgust. "Ethan, before we talk about the future, I need your honesty about the past," Amelia said, her voice softening a perfect act. "In your video, you said you didn't know I was being abused. Is that true?" Ethan nodded quickly. "It's true, I swear. It was Mom who was cruel. I didn't know anything. I was at work all day." "But Ethan," Amelia looked deep into his eyes. "Remember the time I had a miscarriage a year ago because your mother made me lift a heavy wardrobe? You were there. You were playing a video game on the sofa. You even told me to keep it down. I'm in the middle of a ranked match when I was groaning in pain and bleeding. Do you remember that?" Ethan fell silent. He grew agitated. He looked around the quiet restaurant. They were the only ones in the VIP section. He felt safe. "Alara, listen," Ethan sighed, his voice dropping. His true colors emerged. "Honestly, yeah, I knew. I knew Mom was rough. I knew you were hurting. But what was I supposed to do?" She held the purse strings. "If I defended you, she'd cut my allowance. You're tough, Alara. You can take a beating. I figured you were just faking being sick to get out of doing work. So you let your mother torture me for an allowance?" Amelia prodded. "Not just an allowance, the inheritance. Mom promised that if I was obedient, the house would be mine. Besides, you were just an orphan back then. Who cared? It's different now, Alara. Now you're Amelia Sterling. Obviously, I'd worship the ground you walk on." Ethan chuckled, feeling he had successfully convinced his wife with his brutal honesty. Amelia smiled, a smile that would make your hair stand on end. "Thank you for your honesty, Ethan. That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Amelia raised her hand, pointing to the flower vase in the middle of the table. Among the roses, a small red indicator light was blinking, a hidden camera. What is that?" Ethan's face went pale. Amelia took out her phone, showing him a screen that was currently live streaming to the official Sterling Industries social media accounts and several national news portals. The viewer count: 2.5 million people. All of America just heard your confession, Ethan. That you let your wife miscarry for a ranked match and an inheritance. That you only care about me now because I'm rich. The comment section on the screen was scrolling at lightning speed, filled with insults, curses, and threats from netizens directed at Ethan. You set me up. Ethan stood up, his chair clattering backward. It's not a trap. It's the stage you asked for, isn't it? Amelia stood and picked up the glass of ice water in front of her. With a calm motion, she threw the water in Ethan's face, just like a scene from a soap opera. But this time, it felt incredibly real and satisfying. This water is clean, Ethan. Unlike the filthy mop water you let your mother throw in my face. Consider this a baptism for your new life as public enemy number 1. Amelia turned and walked away, the click of her heels echoing decisively on the marble floor. Ethan stood frozen, soaking wet, as other restaurant patrons began pulling out their phones, recording the most hated man in the country. Ethan's social life ended that night. That night, after the devastating live stream at the Skyview restaurant, Ethan didn't go straight home mostly because he had no home to go to. He walked out of the skyscraper, drenched by the water Amelia had thrown on him and the chilling night air of the city. But colder still were the stares of the people around him. In the building's lobby, the usually polite security guards stared at him with open disgust. A few patrons waiting for the valet whispered while pointing at him. That's him, right? The ranked match husband. Yeah, the one who let his wife miscarry for a game. Total trash. Don't get too close. His moral bankruptcy might be contagious. Ethan tried to lower his head, hiding his face in the collar of his musty, borrowed blazer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Notifications were buzzing nonstop, making the device hot. Thousands of messages flooded all his social media accounts. Not praise, but curses. His face had become a national meme. The hashtags number Ethan the Parasite and number Trash Husband were the #1 trending topics on X. Someone had even leaked his personal phone number, causing his phone to be inundated with calls from unknown numbers that just spewed insults or played fart sounds. Damn it! Damn you, Amelia! Ethan cursed, smashing his phone on the sidewalk until it shattered. Now he was truly cut off from the world. Hungry and exhausted, Ethan tried to enter a 2-4-hour convenience store to buy a bottle of water with the few coins left in his pocket. He had just opened the glass door when the young woman at the cash register screamed, "Get out! We don't serve you here!" Ethan was stunned. "Miss, I just want to buy some water. I watched the live stream. I used to have an abusive husband just like you. The sight of your face makes me sick. Get out or I'll call the cops." The cashier grabbed a broom, wielding it like a weapon. A few delivery drivers resting outside the store started to stand up, glaring at Ethan with hostile eyes. Realizing he was in physical danger, Ethan ran. He fled through dark alleys, pursued by the shadows of his own sins. That night, Ethan ended up sleeping in an empty dumpster behind a wholesale market. The rotten stench of garbage enveloped him, a perfect irony for a man who had allowed his wife to be treated like filth. In the darkness, Ethan cried. Not because he regretted hurting Amelia, but because he regretted that his comfortable life had been violently snatched away. He missed his soft bed. He missed Alara's hot meals. He missed his status as the master of his small house. But the world no longer cared. To society, Ethan was socially dead. No company would hire him. No woman would go near him. His name was now digitally etched in history as a symbol of failed manhood. 3 months later, the county superior court was packed. It was the day of the verdict in the case of the kidnapping and torture of Amelia Sterling. The courtroom was filled to capacity with reporters, women's rights activists, and an enraged public. In the front row, William Sterling sat calmly, accompanied by Amelia, who looked stunning in a pristine white blazer, symbolizing a rebirth and untarnished purity. In the defendant's chair, Margaret sat dejectedly. A bright red prison vest was draped over her body, which was now just skin and bones. Her arrogance had been eroded by the harsh reality of prison during the trial. Her once haughty face was now perpetually bowed, avoiding the camera flashes. The presiding judge, a middle-aged woman with a formidable presence, banged her gavel to open the session. The room fell instantly silent. Based on the evidence presented, the judge began, reading from a thick binder, the security footage, the medical examiner's report detailing chronic malnutrition, burn scars, untreated bone fractures, and the severe head trauma suffered by the victim. The judge paused, looking sharply at Margaret. And based on the expert testimony of Dr. Ryan Cole and the validated confession of Mr. Pasadena, Ethan Thompson, the court finds that the defendant, Margaret Thompson, knowingly and willfully engaged in the physical and psychological exploitation of the victim while she was in a vulnerable, amnesiac state. Amelia listened with a stoic expression. Beside her, Dr. Cole gripped the back of her chair, offering silent moral support. The defendant's actions were not merely domestic violence, but a systematic violation of basic human rights. The defendant exploited the victim's helplessness for financial gain and sadistic personal satisfaction. Margaret trembled. She glanced at her lawyer, a public defender appointed by the state, as she couldn't afford a private one. The lawyer just shook his head slowly, signaling that there was no hope. Therefore, this court finds, the judge's voice rose, the defendant, Margaret Thompson, guilty and sentences her to 20 years in state prison. The courtroom erupted in applause. The gavel banged 3 times. Bang, bang, bang. Margaret shrieked. 20 years, I'll die in prison. This isn't fair. I took care of her. I fed her. Silence, the judge barked. You are lucky the prosecution did not seek a life sentence for attempted murder. Remove the defendant. 2 bailiffs dragged the struggling Margaret away. As she was led past Amelia's row, Margaret paused, glaring at her former daughter-in-law with bulging eyes. Are you satisfied? Huh? Are you satisfied? She screamed, spittle flying from her mouth. Amelia stood up slowly. She looked at Margaret not with anger but with a cold pity. I wasn't looking for satisfaction, Margaret, Amelia replied calmly, her voice carrying clearly through the commotion. I was looking for justice. And today, God has delivered it. Enjoy the rest of your life. Margaret was dragged out a side door, her screams fading down the dark courthouse hallway, a hallway that led to the prison where she would spend her last breath. Amelia exhaled a long, slow breath. The weight on her shoulders was finally, completely lifted. 1 year after the verdict, the Sterling mansion stood majestically amidst a rainstorm battering the city. Lightning flashed, illuminating the 10-foot-high iron gates that separated the luxury within from the harsh world outside. At that gate, a gaunt, shivering man stood. His clothes were ragged, his feet clad only in a single, broken flip-flop. It was Ethan. A year of living on the streets had turned him into human wreckage. A skin disease covered his arms, and his teeth were yellow, with several missing from malnutrition. He was no longer the handsome, preening Ethan. He was just a pathetic shadow of his former self. Amelia! Amelia! Ethan whimpered, his dirty hands gripping the cold iron bars of the gate. Please help me. I'm sick. I'm hungry. He knew Amelia was inside. He had seen her car enter a few hours ago. He had walked 15 miles from the underpass where he now lived, just to beg here. On the second floor of the mansion, Amelia stood behind a large window, holding a warm cup of chamomile tea. She watched the small figure at the gate, illuminated by the garden lights. Miss, the head of security entered the room. There's a homeless man at the front gate. He claims to be your ex-husband. Should I have him removed or call the police? Amelia sipped her tea slowly. Her eyes were fixed on Ethan, who was now kneeling in the pouring rain, bowing towards the house. The scene was exactly like one of the soap operas Margaret used to watch while laughing at the suffering of the main characters. A poetic irony. The old Amelia might have felt pity. The old Alara would have surely run outside with an umbrella and a towel. But that part of her was dead, killed by Ethan's own indifference. Is he a threat? Amelia asked flatly. No, miss. He looks incredibly weak. He might pass out soon. Amelia was silent for a moment, contemplating her feelings. Did she hate him? No. Hate required energy. Hate meant she still cared. What she felt now was nothing. Ethan was now the same to her as a stranger she might pass on the street. No feeling, no connection. Just leave him, Amelia said finally. Excuse me, miss? You want us to let him in? No, Amelia turned, closing the window curtain firmly. Leave him out there. Don't chase him away. But don't give him anything. No food, no umbrella, no attention. Let him feel the cold. Let him realize that the door to this house is closed to him forever, just like he closed his heart when I needed his help. Yes, miss. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Ethan screamed Amelia's name until his voice was gone. But the window above remained dark. No door opened, no miracle occurred. Finally, Ethan's body gave up. He collapsed onto the wet asphalt, crying in absolute solitude. That night, he learned life's most painful lesson. Regret that comes too late has no currency. The morning sun illuminated a glass building with the words, "The Amelia Sterling Foundation," etched on it. The building was bustling. Dozens of young lawyers, psychologists, and social workers moved about. This was Amelia's great project, a foundation providing free legal aid and trauma recovery for victims of domestic violence. Amelia sat in her office, reviewing monthly reports. In the last 6 months, the foundation had successfully freed 50 women from abusive marriages and imprisoned 30 perpetrators. Amelia was using her pain as fuel to save others. Knock, knock. The door opened. Dr. Cole walked in, carrying 2 lunchboxes. He now served as the foundation's chief medical consultant, dedicating his free time outside of his hospital practice to helping Amelia's clients. "Lunchtime, boss," Ryan said, placing a bento box on Amelia's desk. "Don't you go getting sick on me. This particular patient of mine is very precious." Amelia smiled, closing her laptop. Her relationship with Ryan had grown organically. There were no dramatic declarations of love or cliched romantic gestures, just a quiet companionship, mutual understanding, and deep respect. Ryan was the antithesis of Ethan. He listened, he supported, and he never demanded. "Thank you, Ryan," Amelia said sincerely. "How's the new patient who came in this morning?" "Her physical wounds will heal in a couple of weeks, but the trauma will take time. Just like you," Ryan said, sitting in the chair opposite her desk, looking at her gently. "But seeing you now gives me hope that she can get there too." Amelia looked at her reflection in the window. She saw a strong woman. The scar on the back of her head was still there, hidden by her hair, a secret reminder of how far she had come. "You know, Ryan," Amelia began, her fingers toying with a pen. "I used to think my life was over the moment that mop rag hit my face. I thought I was just trash." Ryan reached his hand across the desk and took hers. His grip was warm and reassuring. "A diamond that falls in the mud is still a diamond, Amelia. It just needed someone to clean it off. And now you're shining brighter than ever." Amelia felt a warmth spread across her face. Her heart was beating differently, a beat of hope, not fear. "My father invited you to dinner this weekend," Amelia said softly, a little shyly. "He said he wants to officially thank the man who saved his daughter." Ryan smiled broadly. "I'll be there. But tell Mr. Sterling that I saved you because it was my duty as a doctor. The reason I'm still by your side now, that's my choice as a man." Amelia laughed, a genuine happy laugh, a sound that hadn't been heard from her lips in years. 2 years later, the Grand Art Gallery was filled with elites, art critics, and city officials. A new contemporary art exhibition titled The Unspoken Scars was the talk of the town. Amelia Sterling, the curator and main artist, walked through the crowd in a shimmering gold evening gown. She looked regal, confident, untouchable. On her arm, Ryan, now her fiancé, escorted her with pride. Visitors walked past various installations depicting the suffering of women. There was a sculpture made of shattered glass, a painting made from ash, and a sound installation of muffled cries. But the largest crowd was gathered in the center of the main hall, surrounding the main display. On a white marble pedestal, inside a bulletproof glass case under dramatic lighting, was a very simple, yet shocking object. Not a diamond, not gold, not an antique painting. It was a mop rag. The cloth was dirty, frayed, and a brownish-gray color, its fibers worn. The stains of grime were permanently embedded in it. Below it was a small golden plaque that read, "The Trigger. Medium, cotton, tears, dirty water. Artist, Amelia Sterling." This object was once thrown at my face to humiliate me, to remind me that I was worthless. But this object is what woke me from a long sleep. The filth on this cloth cleaned my eyes to see the truth. This is not just trash. This is a monument to my resurrection. An old art critic shook his head in amazement. Brilliant. She turned a symbol of oppression into a symbol of strength. This is the most honest work of art I have ever seen. Amelia stood beside the glass case, looking at the mop rag that had once made her feel like the most wretched creature on earth. Now it was an object to be admired, protected, and valued. Mr. Sterling approached and put an arm around his daughter's shoulder. "I'm so proud of you, my child. You turned your hell into a heaven for others." Amelia smiled, her eyes glistening but not shedding a tear. She saw her reflection in the display case. She saw her past, her present, and her bright future. "Let's go home," Ryan whispered in her ear. "We have a lot of work to do at the foundation tomorrow." Amelia nodded. She turned, leaving the mop rag behind her. She was no longer looking back. That rag was now just history, a silent artifact marking where Alara ended and where the unbeatable Amelia began.